Hey everybody, it's Susan Linder. I'm your host here of the Innovation Storytellers show. Today's going to be an interesting little journey into Web3. And I'm very excited for our guest today, Somi Arian, because she is going to be bringing us a perspective on Web3 that is, I think, without hype, a little bit more unvarnished, I think, than you've heard from some of our other guests on the show, and also filled with aspiration and opportunity. Um, I want to introduce you to someone who's really a thought leader in this space that goes beyond just trying to push a particular NFT or push a particular kind of crypto, because that's not what we do here. What we do is talk about the great stories that drive innovation and change. And I think of Somi as one of those change agents in this particular marketplace. So let me give you a little bit of background on Somi. Somi Arian is a tech philosopher, an award-winning filmmaker, author, entrepreneur, and LinkedIn top voice. She has a background in philosophy and science and technology and defines herself as a transition architect as we enter into an era where humans merge with technology. She is the founder and CEO of InPeak and Smart Cookie Media, and her interest in the exponential growth of technology has led her to study, learn, trade, and invest in blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So we are going to be talking today about all things Web3. I'll leave it as broad as possible so we can include all the yummy goodness that's associated with this new era that is dawning right now. Somi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Susan.
So, Somi, none of us woke up, our senior year of college and decided that we were going to be entrepreneurs in the Web3 space. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, about how you got here, and some of those things that have inspired you and compelled you to get to this place? So, how did you get here?
Oh wow. Okay, so that's a very long journey, and I suppose a long answer. But I try and make it as short as possible. So I am originally from Iran. I came to the UK in 2005 with one suitcase, and I had already saved some money from working in the Netherlands Embassy and United Nations in Iran. So I was getting paid in dollars, which allowed me to save some money and bring it here to the UK and pay for my own education. I studied political philosophy and philosophy of science and technology, and and transatlantic studies. So I have got 2 master's degrees in those areas, and I was always fascinated by technology and how technology is changing humanity. As a philosopher, I'm a Nietzschean. So Nietzsche has got, this concept of constant self-overcoming, and I see a technology being able to constantly enable us to reach beyond anything that is possible for us. So I see technology as that. You know what? Actually, in some ways, a lot of think of technology as a set of tools and techniques. And actually, I talk about it in that way also in my book, that technology is a set of tools and techniques that enhance our abilities. But actually, another way of thinking about it is that technology is a life form in its self, right? And in a way, that we always think that we are using technology, but what if technology is a life form in itself, and it's like co-evolving with us? So I've been really fascinated by this concept and thinking, if technology is a life form in itself, and it's developing just like genetics is mutating and like creating new species, technology is constantly changing and creating new forms of, being engineering. So if you think of it that way, potentially, and if technology is, it is co-evolving together with humans and with this planet that we are in, what if potentially technology will get to a point that it will not need us, right? Like that maybe that it will go beyond, beyond like this co-evolution, if it doesn't work symbiotically anymore. Right now it's working symbiotically, but if it doesn't, because we are already seeing AI, really growing at an exponential speed in a way that our brain isn't. So I've just been really fascinated by that. So that's why I call myself a transition architect, because I think of myself and my role in society as somebody who is, dedicated to try and help humans to co-evolve with technology in a way that we keep a level of our human, values and the things that makes us as beings, but also enable us to evolve. So I don't necessarily think of, a technological transformation. I always think of it in terms of technological transition. So because of that, I started doing a lot of research initially on AI. And as I was doing a lot of research on artificial intelligence, I kept coming across this term called blockchain, and I was like, what is this? And I started to really dig deeper into that. And around 2017, I started reading a lot of books and listening to podcasts and audiobooks and everything about blockchain. But at that time, for a lot of people, when they got into blockchain technology, they got into it because of Bitcoin. But for me, it wasn't actually from a financial perspective initially. It was more from a technological perspective. So I didn't buy Bitcoin very early. I was like just trying to understand what this blockchain technology was. And what made me really fascinated by it was that basically blockchain technology is going to, or from what I could see as I was doing my research, was that this technology is going to disrupt big corporations like Facebook and Amazon and Google if it truly enables decentralization. So I became obsessed with this idea that maybe there is an opportunity to disrupt those big tech companies. When Zuckerberg was building Facebook, I was like trying to get out of the country from a forced marriage. So I have this incredible hardship story of how I left Iran and how I built my life. So I always felt like I was left out of the first big technological evolution that was happening because I was going through that kind of environment. So I was always on the lookout, and I was always thinking that there will be another opportunity. That opportunity is now. So blockchain technology is giving us an opportunity to disrupt big tech, and I'm super excited about that. You're muted.
So for our listeners who are, are puzzling through this Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, trying to figure out where they are in this. This is the way I describe it, and you can let me know if I'm sharing it correctly. As my first job in tech marketing was in 1998 in the dot-com boom, right? So, for me, I originally think of, Web 1 as that proliferation of websites, of the searching of information based on Word and document, right? It is this ability to search for things and find things based on the words that are used in the documents, that how we find them, and our ability to connect with one another based on those interfaces. Web 2, I think of as the era of the platform, where social media comes to bear, where SaaS technologies come to bear, where we have an opportunity to interact with each other across platforms. And it's the platform holders who wind up holding all of the power and opportunity, right? The Amazons of the world. The eBay was one of the initiators of that first platform, right on the cusp of 1 and 2. And then as we move into Web 3, there is this decentralization that takes place where we're moving off of these giant platforms, to your point. And we are now looking at the era of the creator, where the individual holds as much power as these giant platforms. And we have the ability to decentralize from these larger power sources and bring our own creativity, opportunity, the ways that we create either walled gardens, like, individually closed off metaverses, or giant open spaces where we can all interact together and share with one another. And that goes from everything from information and currency all the way up to who knows what will come next, right? All different kinds of hardware and devices that might connect with our bodies, with institutions, with all different opportunities. So did I get that right, Somi, in classifying Web 1, 2, and 3? Am I missing anything?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a classic way that people describe Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, in that Web 1 was read only, Web 2 was read and write, so you can go on social media and actually comment, etc. And then Web 3 is more about in addition to that, also sharing ownership. Web3 is definitely not perfect, and when you get into it, you will see there are a lot of things that are wrong with it, and there are a lot of things that are not yet fully developed, and there are a lot of problems with it. There's also a lot of game theoretical aspects to Web3 because it's all about your value as well, in a way that, let's say, for example, if you buy a membership of, a Web2 platform, you pay a membership price and then you get access. Whereas with Web3, there's often an expectation that should be an NFT and that should be tradable, and then that creates its own problems when it is tradable. So, but I would say that to recap that, there's read and write, and then the ownership. I would say another way of thinking of it is that Web 1 was a monologue, Web 2 was a dialogue, and then Web 3 is, like I said, it's a dialogue and ownership. So there's that new aspect to it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about InPeak and your mission for this.
Yeah.
Because more than a business, it's a mission for you, I feel like.
Yeah, that's right. InPeak. So InPeak is in for inclusive, inspired in this together in the know. So initially started as FemPeak, and it was going to be focusing on bringing more women into the space. But I found that it was very hard to scale it that way because there are not a lot of women. Women are a lot more. I suppose I don't want to say tech averse, but like they're definitely not, most of the time, generally speaking, there are not early adopters of technology that much, and they also spend less money on technology, and from a business point of view, it's very, very hard to build a viable business around something that's so new just on women. So I rebranded it to InPeak and focused on inclusivity. One of the things that we are doing at InPeak, which is a Web3 education platform, although Web3 education is something that we say now, but really it's about emerging technologies. So like if in 6 months time Web3 becomes Web4, then we focus on that, so right now it's kind of easier when I tell people when that is a Web3 education platform, they understand it fully. But essentially really it's a platform that prepares businesses and individuals for the this exponential age of emerging technologies. So right now, a lot of the teaching on the platform is about Web3, and NFTs and, the metaverse, because just like social media was the catalyst for a lot of businesses to get into this, Web 2 space, NFTs is going to be the catalyst for businesses to get into Web 3 space. And every business, yourself included, are going to end up using NFTs eventually. Because it's a new way of, it seems to be like the more desirable way of people wanting to buy, whether it's access, membership. Initially it started out, a lot of people saw it as something that is for art collectibles, but actually right now it's just about, it's about any kind of utility, that everything will be using some form of tokenization. Not all tokens are NFTs. There are two kinds of tokens. There are fungible and non-fungible tokens, and then there's also going to be soul-bound tokens, which is like basically they are tradable. So that's what we do at InPeak, and we prepare and community businesses and individuals for this exponential age. There are two tiers. There's the Genesis group, which is like the thought leaders, the educators, the builders. In the Web3 space, we have different terminology. It's quite interesting. For example, in Web2, we say entrepreneurs. In Web3, we don't say entrepreneurs, we say builders. So it's so interesting. We are doing a lot of content around actually explaining the terminology that is used in Web3. But Web3 is a lot more informal in the way that the communications happen, and everything with the smart contracts makes it a lot easier for people to have agreements. Everything's happening so fast, incredible. Like, there is no chance that governments and big organizations are going to catch up with it. It's impossible. The way that we are hiring people, the way that we are finding team members and building businesses, is impossible for governments to get their head around it.
So, what do you think about a government like El Salvador, for example, right? That's converted its entire, well, it's part of its currency platform, right, into crypto. What do you think about that transition? Does El Salvador have a better shot than the United States in terms of
I
keeping?
think it's a I think it's a step in the right direction for sure. I don't think that they got it right fully, and it's not an area that I've personally followed, in detail. To be honest, I'm less interested in Bitcoin because there isn't the kind of community that there is in the NFT space, especially in the Ethereum and also a little bit also increasingly in the Solana, although Solana is having a lot of technical problems. But right now, I would say like the biggest community is the NFT community around Ethereum. And, like my team members want to be paid in ETH, and there is a whole new kind of economy being built around ETH that is not in Bitcoin. So, I kind of lost interest in Bitcoin a little bit.
Yeah, what are your people want to be paid in ETH. So what are they spending that on? Or are they just kind of hoarding Ethereum, for a rainy
They
day?
try to hoard. I think everybody's trying to hoard as much as possible, but if, obviously everybody has to pay for their lives as well. So
Right.
if they really have to, they will sell it. But, people value ETH so much that even when it's down, like they prefer to be paid in ETH.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit in the beginning about building in a bear market. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because there people feel so unstable, right? They feel so questioning around where do I get in? How do I get in? Is this the time to get in, et cetera, et cetera? What is it like to be building your business in the midst of this bear market? We
It's
saw big.
wonderful. It's the best time because everything is cheap. Everything's cheap. Like it's so easy to find people, because there isn't a lot of money going around. So it's the best time to find really good team members. It's the best time to, if you have enough money to survive the bear market, it's the best time. Because, for example, right now, because of the bear market, it's so much easier for me to gain access to big names. Those big names are going to be so much harder. Like yesterday I had Kevin Rose on my podcast,
Wow.
and then he's coming on our platform to do a train, a session, a educational session. If we were in the bull market, like I wouldn't be able to get time with Kevin, who would be so busy, right? So there are some amazing people, so much talent in the space right now, that these people, like if I can get them on my platform to do educational content, then that content gets recorded and is there, and it's going to be valuable. And then when the bull market comes in about 18 months, or who knows how long, might be earlier, might be later, but when the bull market comes, I will have built a really strong community, fan base, and content base. And at that time, it will be so much easier for me to raise investment, and I will be in such a strong position. So it's very hard to build in the bear market, but it's wonderful if you can see it as an opportunity.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what you're actually building. What do you see is MPeak doing for its community and then, its larger aspirations?
So InPeak basically has got two, right now it has got two segmentations of audience. There's the type of people who are already thought leaders in Web3. They are our Genesis members, and there are only 450 tokens that will, and only 375 of them are currently in circulation. So these are going to be like the thought leaders that will make appearances on the platform. They will teach material on the platform. And then there is the Gen 2, which is going to be 10,000 tokens initially for the Gen 2, but then we will expand, because our goal is to eventually get to 3 million users by the end of 2027. So so the Gen 2, the first batch of it, is like the 10,000, and then we will have a Gen 3 and etc. And what I see here, the way that I think we will expand, is that there's always going to be two groups, basically the groups of people who are the thought leaders, builders, educators, and content creators, and they need to have the higher pass, like the more expensive pass. So our Gen 2 Genesis pass we when we minted, it minted for only 0.01, but actually right now it's selling for 2 ETH on the, so like it's 20 times more expensive than the mint price, right? And it's not in my hand, right? Because once we put the mint out, then people buy and sell it, right? And then that's how it gets into more hands. But I just get a small royalty. I don't actually get any money from it anymore. But we've got that for the Genesis, members. And then so it's basically two groups. There's the people who are going to use the content, and there's people who are going to create the content, or they are builders who want access to that, to that audience. So in a way, it's like a marketplace almost in itself, that there are like people who are putting out content, and then there are people who are going to be using that content.
Got it. And the intention is to build up a community of individuals who are kind of trading and see the opportunities around NFT.
No, not trading. I don't we don't encourage it. I mean, of course, we will talk about trading because it's a part of it. But to be honest, I think the trading aspect of NFTs is going to, calm down, because a lot of times a lot of people are going to start understanding that really these are utility tokens, and they should be thinking of it as that. Of course, there's always going to be a collectible aspect. So for example, if you think of LinkedIn, if early days of LinkedIn had a token, and you were there early and you bought one of those tokens, and then let's say once LinkedIn got to 100,000 people, then they would say, we don't have tokens anymore. Now it's only like, membership, and annual membership, right? Then the value of those initial 100,000 tokens, the value of that will go up, right? Because it becomes scarce, and more people would want to access that, because that gives access to the early LinkedIn founders, and it becomes a historical thing. So that's how I think of our Genesis and Gen 2 tokens.
Fascinating.
And then
And
what people learn, what they get, they learn all aspects of Web3. So they learn about, things like everything to do with wallets and security in Web3. They learn about how to build a business using NFTs. Like say for example, you yourself, Susan, if you wanted to use NFTs for your business, that's where you want to be. You want to be joining those sessions, learning about all of those things that we're teaching, and then you build your network, and then you go and teach your audience, your clients about it, right? And you bring them in. But eventually everybody is going to use this new way of, just like everybody had to learn to use social media, everybody is going to have to learn to use NFTs and tokens, basically, not just NFTs, tokens in general. So tokenomics is the next part of the internet. Like, it's another layer of the internet that's being built.
why, for those who aren't really into this space yet, why do we need it?
It's a natural evolution of technology. So like if you think of money, the evolution of money, initially, people always need two things from money. They need a way of exchanging value, and they need a way of storing value, right? So store of wealth and exchange of value. And throughout the years, throughout millennia, we have used different methods for doing that. Initially, people would, use salt. You gave me a bag of salt, and then I gave you, some meat or some, apples, right? And then it went into crystals, and then into, like stones and beads and
gold.
yeah, and then exactly, and then eventually went into coins and precious metals, and then precious metals, then the precious metals, because they were heavy, they were stored, and so people used a receipt to show that, rather than actually changing the gold, they would just use that receipt, and then that receipt turned into paper money. And then with the digital age, we started having digital banking. So blockchain technology and token economy is just the next iteration of money.
And why do you think it makes people so nervous? I mean, aside from
It's just a new
that
thing. It's just because
innovation,
it's new.
disruption, but like
But
there's
just like early days of the internet, people were worried about using their credit card online, Remember, like it's the
Sure.
same. People were afraid of using email. You know, so many people were afraid of using social media. So it's just because it's new, and also there is, because it's new, there's a lot of scams, a lot, and that's part of what we teach on InPeak to keep people safe. Because when you don't know, you can click on the wrong thing, and then your wallet is drained. So there's a lot of discernment that needs to happen, you know, to keep safe in this space.
That's right. Some African prince is here to help you with your currency, right? With your new,
Exactly.
your new
Right, like exactly, like example of the Nigerian prince, you know, there's a version of that happening now in the Web3 space.
Yeah, and let's not pretend that the Nigerian prince has gone away, right? He's still there
Yes.
too, which is great disruption, provides great opportunity for all industries, including crime, right? They say a
Yes,
rising tide lifts all boats. That includes criminals. So,
that's right.
yeah. So it's important for us to be aware. But what's so fascinating to me about what you're doing is that you're providing the educational piece to
Mm.
it, not just the opportunity. And it's that hand in hand that allows us to kind of calm down, have less fear, because all of us, listening, all of my audience is very familiar with bringing in innovation and disruption into a marketplace. And we know the fear that lies on the other side. So can you give us some examples, Somi, of the stories that you tell to get people over the hump, over the disbelief, the desire to sit in the status quo, the desire to sit on the sidelines and just sit and wait it out? What do you tell people to kind of get engaged?
So I try to explain to people is that the Web2 space is so oversaturated right now. Let me put it this way. When you think of 5 years ago, the brands that were coming into the social media space, their marketing budget was like 3% of the marketing budget went into social media. Maybe 1% went into social media. Now about 50% of it goes into social media. So that means that the price of advertising on these channels is so high right now, it's so expensive that it doesn't make sense for new businesses. Whereas in the Web3 space, there is now an opportunity, there's a real opportunity to break through that kind of barrier.
Mm.
It's new, right? But that's not going to last. So I'd say that, you know how for social media it took 15 years to really, proliferate. And if you were early on YouTube, if you were like in social media 10 years ago, you would have built a really good business. I would say that if it took 15 years for social media, for Web3, it's going to take 5 years. So you don't have that long.
You don't have that long, so you have to get moving
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And if you don't, you just going to be left behind.
It's fascinating to me because I remember back in 2017, I was working with a young tech company out of Argentina, and they were building the first Expedia that took Bitcoin, that took crypto. And I remember thinking to myself, who has these Bitcoin? Who has those cryptocurrencies that would actually allow them to spend? Because there weren't enough marketplaces that would actually allow you to spend them. People were creating them, people were buying and trading them, but there wasn't actually a place to spend. And so to think about, who was the correct target market who would be able to spend these coins. And it turned out luxury travel was the way to go, because the people, as always, right, who kind of start off these trends are usually those who are wealthy, have access to cash, who have opportunity to play with money a little bit more. And so that was the dream. That was the desire, is how can we help them spend it? And for a young, poor, starving tech founder, right, a maker, as you call them now, he
A
was trying to,
builder, a builder.
yeah, a builder, excuse me, right. A builder, that this was someone who also wanted to figure out how to get his hands in without having the money to own. So it was just kind of taking drips and drops off of that in the beginning. And I remember leaving that meeting going, this guy is crazy, and that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Still trying to get my arms around it back in 2017 and going, I don't exactly know how to help this person, but I'm intrigued. And so I think, like you, my investigations into the space started back then just trying to figure out what was my place in it. And I don't call myself an early adopter by any stretch. I still remember a client coming to me in 1999 and going, do you really think I need a website? I don't see anyone in my industry with a website yet. And I go, maybe just hold off on that for a while. See where the internet thing goes. That was my brilliant marketing advice back in the day, by the way. So
Don't tell that to anyone.
yeah, I'm happy to disclose all of my faults. That's fine. But don't make the mistake again, right? Is the point, is when the opportunity comes knocking on the door to get involved, at a minimum, learn.
Yeah, that's right.
Minimum learn. So, Somi, as we're coming on to the top of our time together, there are oftentimes I ask people these kinds of questions. Number one, what is it that you wish everybody would know about Web3 that you think they don't yet? What do you wish that people would know?
That is not going away. This is
Mhm.
not going anywhere. Like it's like you are gonna use it. You're gonna have to use it. There is no getting around it. So you better get on board because otherwise you will just lose opportunities. Like delaying it doesn't actually solve. Delaying it is it just means that when you want to get in. And one other thing I want people to know is that the later you come in, the more expensive it will be.
And I think people are still going, coming into what? What am I coming into? Am I suddenly on like, buying pound sterling versus dollars? Like, is that how I should be thinking about? Like, what am I coming into?
You're coming into a new space, and we actually call it the space. Like whenever we're talking about,
It makes it so much easier to fathom, right?
yeah, yeah, you're coming
As a
into a new.
storyteller, I'm just coming into a big white open Apple showroom with nothing in it.
Yeah,
That's what it feels
yeah,
like for the listener.
yeah. So you're coming into a new space where instead of where you're coming to a new space where the unit of exchange has changed. Like the way that we exchange value has changed, and we think of money in a different way. We think of value in a different way. And there's a very steep learning curve, very steep, and that's going to be. And the later you come into it, the harder it is to understand it. The culture has changed. Like there's a completely different culture in Web3, completely different. Currently everything's happening on Discord, some of it on Telegram, but a lot of it mostly on Discord, especially in the NFT community. And of course, I'm sure that Discord won't be there forever. I'm sure somebody will create something better. We will probably move things to our own platform, but right now it's all about Discord. And communication on Discord is very different to communication on, say, Twitter or social media. I don't even spend that much time on LinkedIn anymore. Nowadays, I'm mostly on Twitter because of because the my community is on Twitter. Most like the NFT community is mostly on Twitter. So you've got to go where your audience is. So you need to learn about how to use crypto Twitter, NFT Twitter, and Discord especially. Learn. I initially I didn't really want to go into Discord, but it's inevitable. And you need to learn how it works, and everything is token gated. So you either have the token or you don't, and if you don't have token, you don't get into things.
Fascinating. So
Yeah,
that's our
so
that's our
like we
ticket
have
off
got.
time, right?
Yeah, so like we have the Genesis token and the Gen 2 token, and then channels are token gated. So the Gen 2, if in the same server, in the same Discord server, the Gen 2 members won't be able to see what the conversations in the Genesis token, Genesis, lounge.
So we're creating these gates around these tokens, right? Even if
Well, it's just a tiered membership. It's just a
yeah,
tiered membership.
that's a way to think
That's
about it.
yeah, yeah,
Tiered
yeah,
membership.
100%. It's just a tiered membership. That's what it is. Like so, the more expensive membership gives you more access. It's always like that.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to ask you my hot seat questions, and this is just stream of consciousness. You can just tell me what first comes to mind.
Mhm.
So, if you had the opportunity to join any innovation team in the course of human history, what would it be?
Innovation team. Well, I would definitely want to be around Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the beginning of Apple. It's founding Steve and Woz, sitting in the garage putting together the first
No,
Apple?
maybe like the later actually. I'm more interested in the later, like, later stages of Apple when he came back, and that's the time that, like, his comeback was so fascinating. So I would say, yeah, he would definitely be. He's like, it gives me goosebumps thinking about it. I just think so highly of that era and him.
Yeah. So what about greatest innovation of all time?
Oh man, that's a difficult one. It's got to be language.
Language.
Yeah.
Wow. This anthropologist is on board with that answer. I love that. And finally, what's an innovation you would love to see in the world that doesn't exist right now? Something that absolutely drives you crazy that you wish somebody would fix, or that you have an aspiration for something bigger? What do you wish to be
Well,
in
I
the
would
world?
say I would say like it may not be what my answer may not necessarily, not everybody might understand, but I think it really bothers me that all of our innovation in especially in medicine is created around men. And I think
Mhm.
that there's so many things we don't understand women's bodies. We still don't understand it. And I think I really want to see more innovation around, female biology.
Fantastic. I can still remember my first job out of college in 1992 was working in a breast cancer center here in New York. And I remember the doctor that I work with, she was an oncologist, one of the first Black oncologists working in breast health at the time. And I said, "Where would you like to see funding going?" And she said to me, "Did you know that currently, 1992, there is more money allocated by Congress to study male pattern baldness than there is to study breast cancer?" And this is what happens not only, right, that we're not
I'm
studying
not
women, but this
surprised.
is
Yeah.
what happens when you have decision makers holding the reins of the purse, right, to determine where money goes, right? So we're right on the cusp of election season. I want to encourage everyone to vote for the issues that matter most to them, and to remember that he who handles the money, to Somi's point, right, whether that's ETH or Bitcoin or whatever, or the almighty dollar as it stands at the moment, is the one who's making decisions too.
Yeah.
So,
That's as I become more and more successful, that's where my money is going to go.
amen, sister. Love that. Somi, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to get in touch with you and learn more about InPeak's mission, what can they do?
Best thing to do is to go to InPeak XYZ. That's INPEAK XYZ dot XYZ, InPeak XYZ. And, follow me on Twitter. Nowadays, I spend mostly time on Twitter.
Right. And on Discord, we'll see you there
Yeah, with Discord, you would need to have the token. So,
for
but on,
sure.
yeah, Discord
But
is
we're going to
token.
get people involved. So that'll happen
Yes.
too.
Yes,
Somi, thank you so
exactly.
much for joining me today.
Thank you.